LeBron James delivered another impressive season for the Los Angeles Lakers in 2024-25, averaging 24.4 points, 7.8 rebounds, and 8.2 assists, numbers that earned him a spot on the All-NBA second team and a sixth-place finish in MVP voting. Despite James's standout play, the team fell in the first round of the playoffs, and his groin injury in April raised questions about the long-term approach of their star-led strategy. With the deadline for NBA player options set for Sunday, focus has shifted to James's contract situation. While rumors swirled that James would pick up his $52.6 million player option, some Lakers fans hoped he might reconsider this decision and take a pay cut to free up cap space for additional support around him and Luka Doncic. Multiple fans and analysts suggested he could help the team chase another ring by adjusting his salary. However, a new report from ESPN's Dave McMenamin on Saturday confirmed that James is still expected to pick up his player option for the 2025-26 season, which will limit LA's team building options. McMenamin noted, the only mechanism the Lakers are projected to have in free agency is the taxpayer mid-level exception worth $5.7 million because James is expected to pick up the final year of his contract for $52.6 million. Fans have reacted strongly to the news. One wrote, 40-year-old billionaire that wants Luka to rot with him until he retires. Another added, you're telling me a billionaire who's 40 can't take a vet minimum so it can help his team sign players to win another ring? This is why he'll never win another ring, another fan concluded. He's so selfish, man. He has never been a team player, another fan critiqued. The most uncompetitive GOAT we have. Give me Jordan every day of the week, a fan mentioned. Least selfish, another fan labeled the four-time MVP. Now let's go to another video. Don't forget.
We knew the Lakers added Adu Thoreau in the draft. He's taken up a roster spot. Now, people will say, well, what about like RJ Davis? What about Eric Dixon? Well, Eric Dixon is on here as a two-way contract, but like RJ Davis, the guys who are Exhibit 10 deals, I don't have them listed here on the active roster. So as of right now, the Lakers, as they currently sit, have only two open roster spots. They also have one two-way spot open because Trey Jemison is taking a two-way spot from last year. Now, two-way spots are very flexible. That could change in an instant. They could move on from Jemison. They could keep him. They could add a third two-way player. They could move on from Eric Dixon. Any of that stuff can happen. But in terms of the full roster, right now there's only two spots available. However, that might be a little bit misleading because, Ron, I would be surprised. His guarantee date isn't until the 20th. But I would be surprised if Shake Milton is on the Lakers roster past his guarantee date.
Yeah, I think for him to get his contract guaranteed would tell me that they basically didn't do anything for the next 3 weeks.
Right. Which, let's keep our fingers crossed that that's not what happens here. So looking at this Lakers roster, I do think that while the free agent class is not great, they need to open up some more flexibility here. And one spot can be because you don't have to fill all 15 spots. You only have to fill 14. So if they're only going to fill 14 spots, that's one player. You remove Shake Milton, that's two guys. I don't think that's enough change on this roster. I don't think they need to tear this whole roster down, but I think some work does need to be done on the trade market, even if it's just to open up some room, because frankly, right now, they've got too many spots being taken up by guys that we don't know if you could put them in an NBA game at this moment.
Right. I mean, you look at this roster, and I think realistically there are two, and I think you could maybe make the argument for three, maybe four players on this list that really are like not untouchable entirely, but just like off the table in terms of there's no real reason to deal them. Obviously, LeBron and Luka, and I think you could make the argument that like Dorian Finney-Smith should be on this roster because of his skill set, because of his friendship with Luka, like he just should be on the roster. Beyond those three, you could make the argument for Reeves, you could make the argument for Rui, but there's no real need to guarantee any of these people on the roster. So there's so much flexibility. Yes, they only have two open spots right now, but there's so much change that could be made to open up spots, get new players in, because, the roster can't be what it is right now.
Right. So bottom line, Rob Pelinka has his work cut out for him when we look at this roster here. And let's also keep in mind, I'm assuming they will be back, but we don't know. But LeBron James and Dorian Finney-Smith both have player options. The 29th is their deadline to decide on those things. So that's coming up on Sunday. They have to make a decision known on those things. Now, they could decline their player options and sign new deals. They could pick up their player options. Dorian, in the case of Dorian Finney-Smith, he could do a contract extension right now. So one way or another, though, Ron, we will have some decision made on Dorian Finney-Smith and LeBron James by Sunday.
Yeah, and I think it would be very surprising to see either one of them not on this roster on June 30th when free agency starts in one way or another, whether that's a player option being accepted, whether that's a new deal being agreed to. But I think, come this time next week, it would be shocking if either one of those guys isn't on the roster.
Now, I already mentioned Shake Milton, non-guaranteed $3 million. He probably is off the roster. If the Lakers had to, in a pinch, free up a roster spot, Jordan Goodwin is still a team option, but I would be surprised if they moved on from him. Now, if it was we need a roster spot because superstar whoever is going to wind up on the team, okay, I would imagine they would go ahead and make that move. But otherwise, I would assume that on a $2 million contract, they would be happy to pick up that team option on Jordan Goodwin.
Jordan Goodwin also, he's not necessarily a playoff level player, but he fills the need for the team in the regular season, certainly.
Absolutely. He's the kind of guy that can help you get through 82 games. He may not be a guy you're going to rely upon to win 16 games, but the 82, he could certainly be a nice guy to eat some innings for you and go out there and give you something, especially given that he fits, defensively at the guard position. Okay, so that's where the roster currently stands. Right now, we're looking at most likely a couple of open roster spots here for the Lakers to play with. They're going to have to make some moves in order to open up more. Looking out there at the free agent market, at who is available, and I do think the Lakers are going to have to do work on the trade front. But in free agency specifically, unless something happens, like if Dorian Finney-Smith were to walk away, that would most likely open up a full mid-level exception for the Lakers, which would be about $14.1 million that they could spend in free agency. A LeBron pay cut, I suppose. But again, I don't want to give false hope that that's something that's going to happen. It's not what we're expecting to happen. But aside from an unlikely chance of opening up the $14.1 million mid-level, most likely the Lakers are going to have the $5.7 million taxpayer mid-level exception. So looking at the names that are out here, a lot of these guys are either not actually going to be available or at least not available for the taxpayer mid-level. Who are the players that you think are kind of in the pool of players that are realistically attainable for that $5.7 million, but also they make sense for the Los Angeles Lakers?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at just this list. There are three guys here that I see as both realistically available at the mid-level, and I'm actually not even sure I would give the mid-level to all three of these guys, but at least you could make the argument, and I think that's Brook Lopez, Clint Capella, and Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown, I actually think you may be able to get for less.
That'd be nice.
I don't necessarily see his value being beyond a taxpayer mid-level. He hasn't really shown much at his last couple destinations. Of course, he still has what he did with Denver a few years ago, but his value is definitely at an all-time low heading into this free agency. So I don't know that he's going to get much more than a taxpayer mid-level. But I don't really know if that's the perfect fit because of offensive concerns, whatever. I think it really comes down to Clint Capella and Brook Lopez being the two center options, being your taxpayer mid-level guys. I think both of those guys are probably going to go for around that amount. And I think you could make an argument for either one being a better fit or a worse fit for the Lakers.
Yeah, I mean, and Rob Pelinka talked about this at the post-draft presser last night, talked about that everybody knows they need a center, right? He talked about that right when the season ended as well. Obviously, they didn't address the center position in the draft, and now they've got to go get somebody. Now, if you're Rob Pelinka, if both Brook Lopez and Clint Capella say, deal, I'll take 1 year 5.7 million or 5.68 whatever it is million, which one would you pick? Which one do you think would be the best fit for the Lakers? And should Lakers fans be happy with that if the solution for the starting center position for the time being is Brook Lopez or Clint Capella? Is that good enough?
I don't know if it's good enough. I think I would lean Clint Capella just because I think at this stage Brook Lopez is just simply, he's a little bit too.
Is he washed?
Yeah, I don't want to say. I didn't want to say.
You don't want to say it.
I don't want to say it. He's a little washed. Clint Capella is also kind of a little washed, but where Clint Capella's like drop off really shows is his hands aren't quite what they used to be. Like he's not really a great lob threat at this point because his hands just aren't like the catch radius isn't what it used to be, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the defensive instincts are all still there. I do think he can provide a lot there. I think he can provide more defensively than Brook Lopez can at this stage. Brook Lopez obviously has the 3-point shot over Clint Capella, but where the Lakers are right now, I'm not looking at 3-point shooting from your center being like the thing you need. And I think I would take Clint Capella's defensive instincts, hands, whatever at this point over Brook Lopez, given where he's at in his career. Either way, I don't know that this is necessarily something that Lakers fans should be like ecstatic about. I think if they do this, it's clear that any available trade was not worth it for Rob Pelinka and company, like they clearly felt. And this is just a stopgap option to sort of push the chips to next year and say, we think we can be competitive with this guy at center as our starting center. But more importantly, we have all the flexibility in the world to go get a center at the deadline or next summer.
Right. It may be pushing towards the trade deadline, which of course nobody wants to hear. Everybody wants to hear they're going to get the guy right now. But let's remember the Lakers, everybody knows the Lakers need a center. So I do think that could be a leverage issue in trade negotiations, and it could make them need to be a little bit patient as they wait to find somebody. Again, I'm not saying that's what we want to see happen. We want to see them get the guy, and the Lakers are ready to roll opening night and not just a stopgap player at the 5. But there is the possibility that, maybe the price on Nick Claxton is crazy high. Maybe they're not that into Nick Claxton to begin with. There's some of the options that are out there. Robert Williams, we've talked about him. Like maybe there's just too much concern about his injury history, and rightfully so. Maybe the Danny Ainge price for Walker Kessler is nowhere near reasonable, and then the Lakers are put in a position where they've got to settle on a Clint Capella or somebody like that for the time being. Again, not where we necessarily want to go, but Ron, I ultimately think that's really what the taxpayer MLE is going to come down to, that $5.7 million. Essentially, I think even if they land a center on the trade market, they might still need to use the $5.7 million on a center. But if they don't land a center on the trade market, they have to use the $5.7 million on a center in free agency.
Right. Like I could see a world where the Lakers do make a trade for a Walker Kessler, a DeAndre Ayton, a Nick Claxton, whoever, and still say, you know what, let's give Clint Capella or Brook Lopez $5 million because we want a more stable backup than Jackson Hayes. We want someone with veteran leadership. Like we want, whatever intangibles you want to look for. We want Brook Lopez's 3-point shooting to counteract the fact that DeAndre Ayton doesn't shoot threes. Like it's that type of thing. They could want a different look. But yeah, if they don't make a trade for one of those Kessler, Ayton, Claxton, whoever, there's pretty much no choice. And looking at this list, it's Brook Lopez or Clint Capella. Like that's it. So if the Lakers don't get a center via trade, you can pretty much guarantee that one of those two guys is a Laker.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that's what's going to most likely what this is gonna come down to. Here, let me just sort just by center so we can truly look at this. I know people say, well, Miles Turner. Now Pacers are going to bring him back. Even if they're not willing to pay the tax, they'll make other moves on their roster. Yeah, Naz Reid's not going to be available.
Naz Reid and Miles Turner Naz Reid will make a little less, but both of those guys are going to make in like the high 20s to low 30 million per year ballpark. And that's not something the Lakers can do.
No. Okay. Further down, what about Al Horford? I know he's not a night in, night out starter, but let's say, the Boston Celtics, we know they're cutting salary. Let's say the Lakers were to trade for a center, whether it's Walker Kessler or whoever. Al Horford, 39 years old. Even older than Brook Lopez.
Yeah.
Would you consider him an option if he decides he's open to leaving Boston?
If you get a center via trade, sure. I do think he's going to get around the taxpayer mid-level. It seems like that's kind of where his market is, like that $5 million-ish range. If the Lakers already have a center via trade and they decide whatever center they decide they say, oh, we also want to bring back Jackson Hayes because we like the different look that he provides, the athleticism that he provides. So we'll sign him using bird rights, or whatever, not full bird, but whatever raise they can offer him off the, I think it's early bird or whatever.
I believe it's early bird because it's 2 years with the
that they
Lakers.
can offer him off of the minimum. They could say, we'll do that, and then we'll use the tax pyramid level on a completely different position. Then I would say Al Horford is a decent option. I do worry, and this is kind of my fear with Brook Lopez and Clint Capella, but like I fear having someone who's that slow at this stage in their career on a team with LeBron and Luka and Reeves is really going to hamper things, because with those three guys at the helm, you need the rest of the guys to kind of run, because that's how you're going to get transition opportunities. That's how you're going to get these good looks. That's how you're going to be active defensively. And but I still would be open to it in theory.
Okay. Now, what about perhaps more active big man? Could be Celtics, Luke Cornett. Celtics big, 29.9. He's about to turn 30. Would you be better off if, again, it's an if you can get him, would you be better off going with him, who is more of a career backup than a 37-year-old Brook Lopez, who is maybe a little bit washed, a slightly washed Clint Capella, Al Horford at 39? Would you be better off just age-wise and washed factor going with a guy like Luke Cornett?
Luke Cornett is not washed at all. In fact, one could argue he's playing the best basketball of his life right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So you could argue that. I do think if you get another center via trade, then it becomes more appealing. I just don't think Luke Cornett is a starter for 82 games or 16 games or whatever amount of games you want to put on it. He's just not a starting caliber player. But I do see the value in having him if you already have another center option.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think he would be an interesting addition that would, maybe it's funny because if you said this a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever, Luke Cornett in the same breath as Clint Capella or Brook Lopez, like it sounds ridiculous. Right. It sounds absolutely ridiculous. And that's not to say that Luke Cornett isn't a good player. He's a solid rotation player. Brook Lopez and Clint Capella, I think we're probably a bit above that. Certainly Lopez, but that's not where we're at this stage. So maybe that's another option, but there's not a lot. We've talked about bringing back Jackson Hayes. If the starting center is the correct fit, bringing back Jackson Hayes does make some sense for the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah, it also depends on the type. Like if the Lakers went out and got Nick Claxton, it would then make no sense to have Jackson Hayes.
Correct. Absolutely. That's the thing. It's got to be a complementary skill set to what they already have at the starting position. And you know what? I think people are probably a little too down on Jackson Hayes, but I feel pretty comfortable saying he's not the starter. He's not the I'd be okay with Jackson Hayes as a backup in the right rotation. Right. But I think he's not your answer at the starting position.
And he also can't be like, you're only getting him if you can get him for the early bird raise off of the minimum.
Yeah, you're not using your taxpayer MLE on him.
Right.
There's too much of an opportunity cost. Okay. So again, it's a little bit slim pickings there for the Lakers at the center position. Yeah. We'll see what they can do on the trade market. But essentially, those guys that we just talked about, Luke Cornett, Brook Lopez, Clint Capella, Al Horford, those are the primary names that were. Oh, Kevon Looney is somebody we should have mentioned. I don't know that he leaves Golden State, but if he does, again, rotation level big, I don't know that you want to lock him in as your starter for 82 games, but certainly somebody who should at least be in the conversation, I think.
Yeah, Kevon Looney he's only 29, but he's definitely not what he once was, which is interesting.
It's funny. We've got these guys who are like Al Horford, still effective at 39. LeBron, right, turning 41 this year. You've got Chris Paul hanging on. These guys that have this incredible longevity. And then we have these other guys, like Clint Capella somehow looks like an old 31 out there. Kevon Looney, not quite what he used to be, and he's only 29. Like, it's funny the way certain guys get hit by age and others don't.
Right. Like Kevon Looney was playing the best basketball of his life at like 24, and that was just it.
So let's assume, though, that they do use that taxpayer mid-level on one of these guys, whoever it is. Then from there, you're rounding out the remainder of the roster with your veteran minimum. So we're talking about a spot, maybe 2 roster spots that you need to fill in order to do that. What are you looking for at that stage, Ron? What do you try to find for the Lakers if you're trying to fill the last couple of spots with veteran minimum deals?
Yeah, I mean, I would start by calling Bruce Brown and pleading. I think if you can get him on a minimum, that's a really huge get. I don't necessarily think I think he will get more than a minimum, but I also could see a world where like this free agent market is already so slim and then it dries up quickly. All the cap space goes away, all the mid levels go away, and Bruce Brown is left without a chair. And as we've seen in the last few years, there's kind of no better place to rehab your value than being a Laker.
Absolutely.
There's a couple teams where that's true, but for the Lakers, that's really been true. You know, Malik Monk being like one of the prime examples. Like, you can rehab your value as a Laker. And so if Bruce Brown loses the game of musical chairs with all these taxpayer mid levels, I could see a world where he maybe says, I'll do it. And that would be, I think, a big get. I think you could make the argument that Malcolm Brogdon is a good get for a minimum. He again, he's one of those guys that because of the injury risk, he could lose the game of musical chairs pretty quickly because a lot of these tax-paying teams, when it comes down to using their one big piece, the taxpayer MLE, they don't want to use it on a guy who might miss 40 games. So could see that world too. Beyond that, this just is not a good.
I love this free agent class, Ron.
It's just not a good free agent class. I'm like trying to get like.
I mean, Dennis Schroeder would be great, but he may go for a full MLE. Like there's buzz that Sacramento might want him at that number.
That's where we're at in this free agent class is like Dennis Schroeder's going to get $13 million a year from someone. D'Angelo Russell might get more than a taxpayer mid-level, given all the history we have on D'Angelo Russell.
There's already rumors linking him to Dallas for at the very least the taxpayer MLE as well.
Yeah, like so these guys who are not particularly impactful or amazing gets are going to have some slightly inflated value. And again, the reason why I even mentioned Bruce Brown or Malcolm Brogdon is because their values right now are a little lower than Dennis and D'Angelo Russell, given like what we've just seen from them, like recency bias. D'Angelo Russell and Dennis Schroeder are a higher value get at the moment. So like I could see those guys getting spots and a Malcolm Brogdon losing and not having a spot.
And that's where the Lakers need to be standing there with arms wide open saying, welcome to LA. Here's your minimum contract. You know, hopefully you can rehab your value. Bruce Brown going from $22.5 million to $3 million or so on a minimum contract. That'd be quite a drop, but sometimes that's the market. And it is going to be a very tough market for free agents because, Ron, as much as we're looking at this and saying there's no free agents out here, there's also no money. There's teams that have the mid-level. There's teams that have the taxpayer. But nobody's got cap space aside from the Brooklyn Nets, and they're probably going to use that to be a facilitator in trades. So there's not that big payday out there for these guys because there's not teams with cap space to spend.
And Bruce Brown, I actually think Malcolm Brogdon's more likely because of the injury factor of it all. Like teams but with Bruce Brown, the only hesitation I have where I say I don't think he's really realistic at the minimum is only because a guy like Bruce Brown could still look and say, once I take a minimum, I'm a minimum guy. Like people will view me as that. And so I need to do whatever it takes, even if I'm taking a biannual exception, just anything but a minimum so that people still view me as someone who is worth paying extra for.
That's fair. That is a thing, right? Where it can be difficult once a player gets the perception out there that they are a minimum player. It can be difficult for that player to play their way off of a minimum.
Right. I mean, you're looking at this isn't minimum, but like Russell Westbrook, the second he got a taxpayer mid-level, he played really well for Denver, and he's still a taxpayer mid-level guy. Like he's probably never getting out of that ever again.
Right. Okay. Let's take a look. Like Gary Payton II. There's an interesting player there, but he's somehow doesn't feel like he should be that old, but he's 32 and a half right now. But there could be a potential target there. Josh Giddey is going to be a guy who's going to stay with the Chicago Bulls. These restricted guys, Davion Mitchell would be a great target, restricted free agent. He's not going to be available. Aaron Holiday, we know, is already going back to the Houston Rockets.
And while I like Davion Mitchell, do you want to be have the third Heat restricted free agent that got renounced and then signed with the Lakers?
No, there should be a general rule for the Lakers. No Miami Heat players anymore. You're
If
not allowed to
Miami
do
is
that.
saying we don't even want you as a restricted free agent, he's not good. We're done.
Yeah, can't do it. Cannot do it. Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I mean, the closer we get to free agency, because Lakers fans love to target him, it feels inevitable that he's going to get a full MLE from somebody.
I would argue, I think he's one of like the 3 most coveted free agents on this market.
Yep.
Like he's a coveted player around this league, and the Lakers just have no shot.
Now, Amir Coffey is another one, but again, this is where you run into some problems, right? Like, let's say you want to get Amir Coffey, okay, but a lot of teams can offer the minimum. You probably need to offer a little bit more. Then you got to get into your taxpayer mid-level ups, but we need that for a center. So that'll be a little bit like these guys who maybe get a little bit more from some other teams. That would be a nice fit for the Lakers. It may be tough to actually acquire them with a minimum deal, unless, like you said, we get to a point where the money dries up and then the Lakers can pounce on some of these players and pick them up. But that might require, from Lakers fans, I know you hate hearing this word, patience, because that would require the free agency process to play out for a few days before the Lakers are able to snag these guys. It would take the music stopping, as you said, Ron, and these guys being left without chairs for LA to be able to grab some of these guys on minimum deals.
Right. Like Bruce Brown is not signing on Monday at 6:01 for a
minimum.
That he's just not.
That's where we'll see player X signs with team Y, and boom, there's a bunch of movement happening. And people are saying, where's Rob Pelinka? Why is this not happening? What's going on? Why is he not signed anybody? It's because of that factor. He's going to have that $5.7 million to spend and then minimums after that. And in order to use those minimums, it may take being patient a little bit to let the market play out for a few days before you can go and swoop in and grab some of the guys once the money is all gone elsewhere in terms of other teams, full mid-levels or taxpayer mid-levels.
Yeah, and I mean, you scroll down a little bit and I'm seeing some more names. I'm like, wow, this is...
I mean, there's some like Dante Exum combined with Luka fairly well in Dallas. There's some stuff there. There's Tyus. I don't think Tyus Jones is a fit for the Lakers because of the defensive deficiencies, but he's a good player. There's some guys here. Quentin Grimes is restricted, so we won't talk about him.
It's a part of it too is that like Gary Trent Jr. is one of those guys who I think is like a good player and is gonna get, but like he's just not a fit in what LA needs because for some reason Gary Trent Jr. a couple of years ago stopped playing defense, and I don't know when that happened. But
a lot of Lakers fans will still say Gary Trent Jr. is the guy to go get.
And I probably would have said that a little bit ago, but I've now looked up enough of his stuff, enough of the numbers. It's just like he stopped playing defense a couple of years ago.
I mean, back when he was in Portland was probably the last time. But when we get to minimum contracts, talent-wise, like I wouldn't hate going and getting Gary Trent Jr. I agree there's a skill set, concern there perhaps. But, I wouldn't hate going after a guy like him, especially if you can get him on a minimum contract. I also wouldn't hate seeing our old friend Taurean Prince come back on a minimum contract if you can get him. Not that I think you can, but looking at the wing market too. I know the Lakers just added a wing in the draft. They're probably going to do some kind of new deal with Dorian Finney-Smith, but still, you can never have too many wings. There's not a lot of guys out there. Taurean Prince is another guy that you could look at and say, well, is he a lockdown defender? No, but on a minimum contract in terms of value, there's a point where the Lakers needed to just say, hey, this guy is such a talented player above what a minimum would be that he's worth it, even though he may not be the perfect fit.
Yeah, and look, the Lakers obviously center's number one, point of attack defense is number two, and then after that, the Lakers don't have a lot of. I mean, those are two very glaring big needs. But after those two needs, the Lakers are set in a lot of ways offensively. Like they have a lot of really good strengths there, and so at that point, you're just going for value.
So let's finish up with this then. What is the ideal outcome here? Let's say they have to use the taxpayer mid-level on a center. You're saying that's Clint Capella?
I think I am saying that if you're using it on a center, it should be Clint Capella.
Okay. So let's say it's Clint Capella. They have two more spots to fill, let's say. They don't pick up the option on Shake Milton, some other move made. Who are those two guys that you could realistically get with a veteran minimum that you say, okay, given the restrictions, Rob Pelinka did some work here?
Can you go back to the forwards?
Yeah.
I need to see the list one more time to answer this
You,
question.
you just you just want to laugh a little bit. I get it. I get it.
I do need a laugh.
To leave a like. Following the 2025 NBA draft, the road is now wide open for teams to fully shift their focus toward free agency and the trade market. Unfortunately, for the Philadelphia 76ers, one team is already looking to throw a curveball to a huge opportunity that just presented itself. The 76ers have reportedly reconsidered their stance on Paul George and would now entertain the idea of trading him elsewhere, according to some reports before the draft. No deal unfolded involving the 9 time All Star, but the Heat actually gifted them a possible solution in Andrew Wiggins, who is widely believed to be available for taking. However, that's not going to be easy. Multiple outlets have already pointed to the Lakers looking at Wiggins as a trade target to complement LeBron James and Luka Doncic in Los Angeles, especially after a season where they were booted in the playoffs in just 5 games. As flawed as Wiggins is, he has proven himself to be a winning contributor to a team. He was arguably Golden State's second best player when they won the championship in 2022, although things went a bit south from there, leading to him getting shipped to Miami last season in the Jimmy Butler trade. Wiggins, who is still one of the high-end 3-and-D players in the league, would have been a perfect replacement for George, while also costing much less. Miami could have been enticed to come to terms with a hypothetical Wiggins-George swap, especially after narrowly missing out on Kevin Durant. The Heat are still on win now mode, and George, when healthy, would have made a huge difference for them in ways that Wiggins cannot. On the flip side, Wiggins could be a better complementary piece than George due to his defensive aptitude and ability to be a factor on offense without needing the rock as much, which will be crucial given Philadelphia's litany of shot creators. And you, fan, what do you think about Andrew Wiggins' situation? Leave your opinion in the comments.